and maintenance and storage procedures will be examined. We will also look briefly at how the principles you apply to wearing PPE at work should also be adopted when working at home. It's important to remember that wearing PPE doesn't remove or even control a hazard. The hazard still exists, you are just limiting your exposure to it. When looking at ways of reducing risk levels in your workplace, PPE should always be regarded as a last resort control measure. There is in effect a hierarchy of control measures which should be considered before resorting to PPE. Ideally, the hazard should be eliminated or substituted by a less hazardous alternative. If this is not feasible, then engineering and administrative controls should be introduced. The use of localized or mobile extraction units, for instance, can reduce the need for respiratory equipment. If these types of risk reduction measures are not practical or fully effective, then suitable PPE should be readily available. So why do we think of PPE as a last resort control measure? For a start, PPE only protects the person wearing it, whereas controlling the risk at its source protects everyone in the workplace. Effective protection is only achieved by continuous use of suitable PPE, which must be correctly fitted, well maintained, and properly used. PPE may also restrict the user to some extent by limiting mobility or visibility, or by requiring additional weight to be carried. The wearing of PPE can even increase the risks of other types of accidents occurring and can give you a false sense of security, causing you to take even more risks than normal. It's therefore essential to follow all other control and safety measures and not simply rely on PPE for protection. Think about the number of areas and different jobs in your work environment currently requiring the use of PPE. How effective do you think your PPE is at controlling the hazards present in these areas? And what about alternatives to the use of PPE? Are there more effective control measures which could be considered? There will obviously still be a number of situations when PPE remains a vital part of your industrial armour. For example, where other control measures are not feasible or not completely effective, then suitable PPE must be worn. Wearing the correct PPE during maintenance, clean-up or in emergency situations can also be critical. Remember to play it safe at all times when you're on the job. Your eyes, head, hands and feet are no match for chemicals, falling loads or sharp objects. If PPE can help minimize the danger, then wear it. Be aware of the dangers around you, and if you're in a signposted area, then make sure you wear the appropriate PPE. These areas have been signposted for a reason. Hazards exist, and you must wear the designated protective equipment at all times. Depending on a particular task or industry environment, the wearing of PPE may also be prescribed by legislation. For example, noise regulations require hearing protection to be worn if daily sound levels exceed 85 decibels. When choosing PPE, the first consideration is to identify the types of hazard present and the areas of the body in danger. The next step is to assess the degree of risk. For example, in this situation, the hazard is molten metal, and this person's face, eyes, hands, body and feet are in danger. Hearing protection is also required. An assessment of the degree of risk will involve looking at the nature of the material, your proximity to the material, the length of time you are near the material, and so on. Once you are familiar with the potential hazards, you should then compare these hazards with the capabilities of the personal protective equipment and select PPE which has the necessary protective features. Finally, check to see that the equipment fits properly and does not create secondary health or safety risks. With the following work examples, try making your own assessment of the types of hazard present, the body areas which are in danger, and the personal protective equipment which is required. Also consider other possible ways of controlling the risks apart from the use of PPE. Personnel, when working with these hot red teams, should be wearing sufficient body protection to reduce the likelihood of receiving a burn. Tins which fall from a stack could also cause a head injury. A bump cap or hard hat should therefore be worn. Automation of parts of the process has helped reduce risks and allowed personnel to wear cooler clothing. This situation contains a number of hazards. When working with sharp objects, sturdy leather gloves should be worn. Safety glasses and a visor will help guard against flying pieces of metal. Leather aprons provide better protection, and of course adequate hearing protection is necessary to reduce noise exposure. When decanting chemicals, make sure you have the adequate respiratory, body and eye protection. Remember to wear your safety glasses under your visor. Chemical splash suits may also be necessary. When selecting PPE, it's also important to consider the nature of your daily tasks and the demands or limitations which the wearing of PPE may place on you. Keep in mind the degree of physical effort required to do the job, the methods of work, the environment you have to work in, how long the PPE needs to be worn, and requirements for visibility and communication. As an employee involved directly with the tasks, you are best placed to know the special demands of each particular job. It's important for you to communicate with your supervisor or health and safety representative so that they are made fully aware of the characteristics and requirements of your job before decisions are made concerning PPE. If you are a food worker, for instance, then one of your particular requirements will be PPE which can be easily cleaned. Comfort, fit and style should also be taken into account when selecting PPE. Protective items which are uncomfortable or which do not fit properly are commonly cited reasons why workers were either not wearing PPE or not wearing it correctly when the accident occurred. Where possible, personnel should be involved in the selection and trial of PPE. That way the wearer will get PPE which fits and which he or she is more likely to use. In situations where more than one piece of PPE is being worn, it is important to choose items of equipment which are compatible. In this situation, for example, respirator straps worn under earmuffs may reduce the effectiveness of the muff.
So you don't find these very comfortable?
No, I don't find them comfortable when wearing this visor.
Is that all because the band around the earmuffs gets caught on the band on the visor?
Yeah, and it doesn't help with the sealing of the earmuffs.
Right.
So it does away with the purpose of having ear protection at the time that you need to use them. If they're not sealing well, you need to look at an alternative.
Yep.
What about these plugs, Paul? Do you find these plugs more suitable?
Yeah, I do find them more suitable. They're more easier to put on, and you can have them on without even knowing that they're sort of there, you know, without having like the problem that you have with the earmuffs.
Remember, the combination of PPE chosen must work together effectively to control all the risks. Also make a point of choosing quality PPE which meets the appropriate Australian or New Zealand standards. Having chosen the appropriate PPE for the particular hazard, the next step is to make sure that you use that equipment effectively. Make a point of checking manufacturers' instructions for details on fitting procedures and general use. Proper fitting PPE is essential if it is to perform effectively. Ill-fitting equipment can in itself cause an accident or lead to additional health problems. Ideally, each item of PPE should be just that, personal to you. This helps to reduce the spread of infection. It also means that you can choose a piece of equipment which fits well. Let's now look in more detail at some of the main types of PPE and the hazards they are designed to guard against. Head protection must match the hazard. Industrial safety helmets, for instance, protect against falling objects or impact with fixed objects. Scalp protectors or bump caps provide protection mainly against striking fixed obstacles, scalping and entanglement. When choosing head protection, make sure that you choose the appropriate shell size for your head. Additional neck protection can be obtained, and there is a wide range of hard hat attachments which should be considered if your job requires a combination of PPE. Gloves are the most common protectors for the hands. PVC, rubber, nitrile or neoprene gloves are sufficient when working with most chemicals. If you're working with petroleum-based products, then only synthetic gloves should be used. When working with sharp objects, wear metal reinforced gloves. Depending on the nature of your tasks, gauntlets, wrist cuffs or armlets may also be required. Avoid using gloves while working on moving machinery. Moving parts can easily pull your glove, hand and arm into the machine. The most common forms of foot injury occur when heavy objects fall on your foot. A weight rolls over your foot or an object pierces the sole of your shoe. Make sure you wear boots or shoes with steel-reinforced toes and puncture-resistant soles. If you work around exposed electrical cables, then wear metal-free footwear with rubber soles. Rubber or synthetic footwear is appropriate when working around chemicals, as chemicals can eat through leather boots. Make sure you have sufficient eye protection on for the particular hazard. When working with chemicals, for instance, you should wear goggles and a face shield. Never wear a face shield or welding helmet without also wearing your safety glasses or goggles for added protection. If you work in a noisy environment, then you must wear suitable hearing protection at all times. Earplugs may be pre-shaped or individually moulded to suit the particular shape of your ear. There are also disposable plugs which can be compressed and placed in your ear. Whether you wear earplugs or muffs, make sure they fit correctly and reduce noise to a safe level. Protection for your lungs ranges from simple dust masks to half or full face respirators and full body suits. Recognize the particular airborne hazard of each task and choose a respirator filter which will be effective. Remember that cartridges and canisters only have a limited life, so replace them in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. Where there is a shortage of oxygen or any danger of losing consciousness due to high levels of harmful fumes, then use breathing apparatus. Never use a filtering cartridge. Now, pause the video and make a note of our checklist items relevant to each type of personal protective equipment worn in your work environment. To make sure your PPE continues to provide the degree of protection for which it was designed, an effective system of maintenance and storage is essential. Store your personal protective equipment away from heat, dust, sunlight and moisture. Also make a point of cleaning and, if necessary, disinfecting your equipment at the end of your shift. PPE should also be examined before it is put on and should not be worn if it is found to be defective or has not been cleaned. Replacement PPE and replacement parts should be readily available. More comprehensive inspections should be carried out at regular intervals in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. It's a good idea to institute a storage and maintenance system for PPE at your workplace. If you don't have such a system in place, then pause the video and make a note of the items which should be covered by an effective system. jobs around your home, you should also get into the habit of wearing personal protective equipment. Hazardous situations don't just exist in your work environment. Rushing into a job at home without thinking about the hazards and taking sensible precautions can easily lead to a serious accident. Gloves, eye protection, work boots, sturdy overalls, earmuffs and face masks should always be kept handy. As we have seen, PPE is an important and necessary consideration in the development of your company's health and safety program. But PPE shouldn't be relied on solely for protection from hazards. Remember that wearing PPE doesn't reduce the hazards. These hazards still exist, and it's vital you exercise care even when wearing your personal protective equipment. Assess workplace hazards carefully before commencing a task, and always make sure you are wearing the correct PPE to reduce your exposure to those hazards. And if you are given PPE at work, then make sure you wear it. It's been given to you for a reason, and your safety could depend on it.